Welcome to the On the Blue Line podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Mulder, and we call this Morning Roll Call. Used to be called Monday Morning Roll Call if you're going back through the archives. Now it's called Morning Roll Call, partially because I didn't want to pick which day of the week I had to do it on. But I'm glad to be back with you. It is the first day of February. Today's podcast is brought to you by Campfire Blend. It's Campfire Blend coffee. If you go check out what they have, use code BLUELINE, you'll get 10% off. It's campfireblend.com, campfireblend.com. Let's get to today's podcast. So I want to thank you all for joining. Today's podcast is going to be pretty quick. I actually just had a few things bouncing around in my head, and I was like, you know what? I want to get on here and make sure that I get this morning roll call out and that we stay pretty consistent in getting these out to you each and every week. Have you ever had where you just try to, or things are going on in your world, right? And you seem to think that the universe is trying to tell you something. You hear something, maybe it's a motivational clip, maybe it's, maybe it's someone in your family telling you something. And you hear it once over here, and then you hear it over there, and you hear it over there, and you're like, I think the universe, God, somebody is trying to get my attention, try and tell me something. Well, I had that kind of week with a few things. And typically on these morning roll calls, at least over the last few, I've been bringing you a little bit of news every week and so forth. I'm not going to do that this week because I want to get straight to the meat of what I wanted to talk about. And quite frankly, there's really nothing good or new to bring to you that's going to be positive for you at this point. There's a few positive news stories out there, but we'll discuss them in a future episode. If you're in law enforcement, you'll resonate with this, but I know a lot of the people that listen to the show are not in law enforcement or they're former law enforcement. So let me just kind of take you into a moment, and then I'm going to take you from there to the principle that I want to talk about. So calls, depending on where you work and what kind of calls you respond to, but if your primary job is in a patrol function, calls come in typically through dispatch. There is a 911 side, and then there's usually some sort of admin line that people can call. And people are going to call, so people being you and I, the citizens, we're going to call whichever number. If it's an emergency, we're going to dial 911. And if it's something where we're just trying to get a hold of the sheriff's office or the police department or wherever it is, we may just call an admin line because it's not really that big of an emergency, but we need to speak to an officer. So when a call comes in, especially an emergency type situation, they get the best facts they can, but it is not a secret that typically what you read in the call is in what you're responding to. So let me back up there a minute. So this information is taken by a dispatcher, and that dispatcher then places it into a call. An officer or a deputy on the other end reads that call at a certain location, and then they're going to respond to it. And what they read in that call, what they believe they know, is what they're responding to, right? So it's not a secret that typically that information is not 100% accurate. In fact, it's rarely probably more than 25% accurate if I was to just throw out some sort of percentage. And that's no secret at all. And that's no knock, nothing against dispatchers in any way. In fact, God bless dispatchers. Law enforcement could not do their job without them. I know some people like to give them a hard time. I would never give dispatchers a hard time, and I think the ones that I've had the privilege of working with know that. They do an awesome job. But it's the telephone game, right? So you're getting information from one source. First of all, you have to hope that whoever's calling has some idea what's actually going on. And as we know from human nature, people don't know what's going on when they're actually involved, let alone when they're just calling the sheriff's office or the police department. So you get this call, and law enforcement is responding to what they are reading, but they really don't know 100% what it is. In fact, I used to tell trainees, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, that, well, it could be a found property, it could be a homicide. Didn't really matter what the note said, because one of the things a new officer does when they are going through the training phase is they always want to try to understand that call, because they're starting to compartmentalize. Okay, if I get there, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this. So maybe I'm going to a domestic. Okay, well, if I'm going to go to a domestic, let's see here. I got to separate the parties. Then I need to talk to, let's say I need to talk to the victim first. I need to not forget to take photographs. I need to remember to give them, whatever it is. Maybe you're in a state that requires some sort of paperwork to be given to them, like a domestic violence booklet or something along those lines. So it's very natural that you're trying to break down what you're going to do. The problem is you don't really know what you're going to until you get there. So you absolutely have some idea. It's good to rehearse these things in your mind and have some ideas of what you may do in a given situation. But the reality is that what you actually arrive at could be endless. You may get there and nobody comes to the door. Now what? You may get there and you hear something inside screaming. Maybe you hear a fight going on. Now what? What can you legally do? What actions can you take? Maybe it's really bad. Maybe you hear a gunshot. Now what? Now you hear a gunshot and you hear screaming. You hear a gunshot and no screaming. You hear 2 gunshots. What does that mean? So when you think about all the different things that law enforcement responds to and all the different moments, that's kind of what we are trained for and what we go to. But even with all of that, when you get there, you still have to make decisions, much like the scenarios I just threw at you, and make those decisions and then take action. So in training, when you're going through tactical decision making, which is kind of foundational to high priority calls, so maybe you're going to a shooting and so forth, experts and those who teach this will usually say something that you need to move forward, but you can only move as fast as you can think, listen, and communicate. And that really resonated with me when I heard them go over that in a recent training, because it's something I've heard over and over again. In fact, you'll hear the military, and there's a few people who have made famous the statement, the OODA loop. They'll talk about the OODA loop when it comes to decision making in a tactical environment, and how we observe, we orient, we decide, and then we act, right? So there's a couple things that I just wanted to point out this week, because when I sat down to consider what I wanted to talk about in this morning roll call, I looked at the craziness in this world. And, it 1 month down, and it has been insane. Whether we're talking, this oligarchy that somehow we woke up in, which is not what America is. It's not an oligarchy, but we have somehow managed to have this weird merge between business and ruling elites that is just unbelievable to me. And so I read these stories, and then you see it really pushes beyond the political sphere, right? Even like last week, we heard about the whole GameStop thing, and now so we had the ruling elites all upset the first part of the month, so much so that we ended up sticking the military permanently into Washington, D.C., and then by the end of the month, we ended up with the financial side all upset because the Wall Street fat cats were duped by commoners, people like us. And so, of course, then that upset them, and I can guarantee you more changes are coming from the ruling elites. So we're not an oligarchy, but we are acting like one right now, which is just absolutely amazing. And as I read these news stories, as I looked further and further into the rabbit hole and into this craziness, it becomes disorienting. So, when you think about responding to a tactical scene, you get there and maybe it comes out that, hey, there's someone inside, there was screams, and then I heard a gunshot. And you get there, and let's say the door is open or a window is open, or you see something inside that you've got legal authority, you need to get into that house to see what's going on. In that moment, you don't know what's going to happen. And there is so many scenarios, so many things going through your mind. And if you enter into that residence or into that building or into that space, you have to be ready to react. But then by the same token, you have to be able to communicate with those with you for each other's safety. And then you have to be able to make the best decision with whatever you're presented, because maybe all of it is nothing, right? See, we always think when you're going into those situations, it's interesting in training, right? Because you're getting all hyped up and you're like, okay, I'm going to go in there and they're probably going to be shooting at me, so I'm going to be shooting back with my sim gun. But that isn't necessarily what the scenario actually is. You might get in there, and if you've entered into someone else's house, if they're lawfully there, they may grab a gun. That's what I'd do if you came into my house. All these different scenarios. So at the end of the day, you've got to take action, but you have to do it in a smart, deliberate manner, and you can only do it as fast as you can think, listen, and communicate. So that's what I want to point out this week. And then I was going to actually talk primarily about orientation. That was my goal. That's what I had sat down and said, okay, I'm going to talk about orientation this week with y'all. However, I think that we get to the point where we have some orientation, right? We have a moral code. We have, and I'm taking this now and expanding it to in our personal lives, right? Expanding this to the world in which we live. But I think we get the orientation sometimes. We have a moral code. We know what's right. We know that in the United States, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, ensure domestic, we know that we, the people, are supposed to be running this country. So whether we're talking in the political sphere or we're talking something you want to do in your personal life, you know that thing that you've been dreaming and planning, and you probably even know the next step. You know what you need to be doing. In fact, maybe you've been starting to do it. Maybe you set your alarm. You've been trying to take some little actions, and you're like, I'm going to get up and do it today. And then you're like, oh, I just came off that 12-hour shift, and I only got 4 hours sleep last night, which, by the way, was the day before I was recording this episode last week. And you're exhausted. And you're like, you know, the last thing on the entire planet that I want to do today is put out a morning roll call. Yeah, I'm there. I've been there. And we know there's got to be that moment where there's something in you that you know it's the right thing to do. This is what I said I was going to do. This is what I want to do. This is my plan, my dream, my goals, my aspirations, whatever they are. This is what I want to do. And the only thing impeding me from doing what I know I should do is me. So the more I thought about this scenario and this applying it to our everyday life, I thought, you know, maybe it's not really an orientation issue. Maybe it's an action issue. So then the gods of the universe, or the God of the universe, but the universe, depending on your belief structure, depending on how you see the world, I started seeing different things. In fact, David Goggins had put out a video that I caught on YouTube, and it says, live among distractions and be undistracted. And I thought, man, that is exactly it. That is exactly where I'm at right now. Because there are a lot of distractions, and some of them are good distractions in that we need to be aware, right? You need to know what's going on right now. If you live in the United States of America and you love the United States of America, you need to be aware of what is going on in this country, because it is not what the United States of America should be doing. Side note. But what's going on in your personal life? And here's the thing. Things aren't going to get easier. You know, if your goal is to start a business or your goal is to really do anything, it's not going to get easier for a time. In fact, things are going to get very, very hard. And the harder they get, the more incumbent it's going to be upon you to be ready, to step forward, and to, quite frankly, take action. And so those were the thoughts. So going back. First of all, only go as fast. Again, think tactically. You're getting ready to go into a tactical situation. Bullets may be whizzing back at you as you're going into this situation. Only move as fast as you can think, listen, and communicate. However, you got to move, right? You can't just sit there like a bump on the log and just say, oh, well, this is nice. I guess that guy's shooting at me. No. None of this works that way. You have to take action. That's what I like about the OODA loop, right? So you observe, you get oriented. That's that moment of, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to think, we're going to listen, we're going to communicate with each other. But then dang it, you've got to decide and you have to act. Because at the end of the day, get action and start taking forward momentum. And so I really want to encourage you. I happened to catch multiple different things this week. In my downtime, I try to listen to a lot of different YouTube videos and a lot of different podcasts with just things that motivate me, that help me grow, to get better. And for whatever reason, maybe it's the algorithms, I just heard a lot this week on this concept. And it really motivated me, and it really got me thinking about the fact that so often we know what to do. I know what I should be doing. I know the things that are right, that are moral, that are in line with my goals, dreams. And yet, at the end of the day, am I taking action? Am I stepping into the arena? If you're not, we're missing the boat, right? So hopefully, I can encourage you a little bit this week to think about this, right? In what areas of your life maybe you are at that point where it's like, okay, I need to orient here. I need to communicate. I need to stop and think. But then keep moving, get that forward momentum and take action. That's what I want to encourage you on this week. You know what? Let's make February a great month. January, we're going to write that one off, and that's okay. It's behind us. There's nothing I can do to change January, but I can make February the best February I've ever had. So don't forget to catch this Thursday, another interview room where I get to sit down with guests from all walks of life, most of them a whole lot smarter than I'll ever be, and I get to learn great things from them, and I know you will too. In the meantime, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next week at Morning Roll Call, and in the meantime, I'll see you on the Blue Line.